Hey, this is Dave, and I am doing a podcast, and I am with Ken from Mountain View, Sunnyside. Ken, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So I'm trying to come up with a title. You're my second interview, and I'm calling it Church Search.
Nice.
And I'm going to need, in my agenda, basically, is I'm looking for a church. And I thought, why not interview pastors that I barely know, some pastors that I do know, and I appreciate that we did that. First question, if you don't mind, is why did you become a pastor?
God told me. So I loved my high school experience in church. That was where faith became real to me. Like from 3 years old until like 15, 16, we went to church 26 miles away, like 4 cities away. So I could really easily have 2 separate lives. Nobody at school knew about church. Nobody at church knew about school. And then there was a group of kids from the cross-country team that I was on who went to a church that instead of 26 miles from my house was 2.6 miles from my house. So one week they invited me to come to church with them. And it was smaller than the church that I was going to, but there were people there who took away the ability to live 2 lives. And I got involved with them, got involved with the guys who were coming through as youth pastors there. We had 3 in 3 years, which is always the best way to grow a youth ministry.
3 years.
Yeah, 3 youth pastors in 3 years, which probably means they stayed longer than the average. But I remember one day, like, I mouthed off to a teammate at practice, and one of them pulled me aside, and he's like, "You can't do that. You're a Christian. You can't do that." And that was the moment where it's like, all right, these are my people, because like everything was integrated now. So that like come to Jesus moment kind of in high school really gave me a desire to work with high schoolers. And I didn't think I could be holy enough or talk about anything for 35 minutes. So I can't be a pastor. So
for 5 minutes, not for 35.
Right. Yeah. So I started college thinking, okay, I'm going to finish college. I'm going to teach something as something where I won't fall asleep in class. And then I'll coach cross country. That's my plan. And it was the summer after my freshman year. It was July 28th, 2000. I had just spent a week working at a denominational camp in Tennessee. Got to meet some kids who ended up changing my life. One of them was a quiet skateboarder kid. I got to know him during the week and found out that he has a girlfriend back home who's pregnant with their kid. And as a kid who grew up in kind of sheltered suburbia, like that's something that you see and you hear about, but it's not real. And getting to see God's work in him and through him, and me getting to be a part of that, like I left that thinking, man, this is exciting that God saves people, that God gives people hope in the midst of their own disasters and bad decisions and all that stuff, that God is God even in that. So I'm journaling about my whole experience as we're on the plane to our first connection, and I just feel God say, okay, Ken, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. I start crying. I'm writing everything down like, okay, this is it, man. I'm doing this. So the rest of my life, basically the last 22 and a half years now, have been continuing to say yes to that.
22 years. Wow. Yeah. Wow. So one of the things that I'm trying to do, basically, I think social media has changed. Like I think it was Craig from Life Church that said that his podcast is actually more popular than his sermons.
Wow.
And I'm not sure if that's right. I should fact check that. But I'm almost thinking that my intention here is I'm looking for a church that I know there's lots of people. I'm going to say this chasm that is between the people that are outside the church that don't want to come to church. One, they have no idea. They weren't raised. They didn't, like most of us, like I was raised Catholic. But and 2, or they were hurt. Mm-hmm. A year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, and they just like, I'm never stepping into that building or a building like that again. Mm-hmm. So some of these questions that I'm asking are kind of meant to maybe be for them. Okay, yeah. So another easy one, I guess I'll say, if you don't mind, what's your proudest moment of your church here specifically at Sunnyside?
Yeah. When when our campus was being remodeled, so we bought it from a church that had been here for about 50 years. And there's a ton of work that needed to be accomplished for us to move in. And so some of that was we needed to put bathrooms over there instead of right over there off the stage. And during that construction process, some people came in to steal copper, and they ended up lancing off the top of one of the fire sprinklers, which flooded everything. So where we sit right now was 6 inches underwater. And so me and some people from our church came by because I wanted to show them the new property and show them how great everything looked. And so we pull up, and there's water just rushing out of the lobby. And so 2 of us jumped out because we're going to go out and fix this. And then the guy I was with, his 16-year-old son, jumped out too because it looks like we're going to have a fight. Like, he's there for that. So we come in, and we just see water flowing down and out of the bathrooms. The pipe is bursting, and there's a waterfall everywhere. So realized, okay, this is going to set everything back. And this is also why we're here. The fact that there are people who are going to come steal copper pipe from a church to turn it in for money that they can do whatever with. That's why we're here. And so we called the church together, and we had a prayer meeting. We were going to try and do it like right in the lobby, and the pumps that were getting the 6 inches of water out of here were so loud, we ended up doing it back there. But we prayed for the people who would do this. We prayed for our neighborhood. We prayed for the people who live around this place and don't care about this place, because that's why we're here.
So what does Mountain View, again, what do you do? And I say it because I don't know the answer to this, but what do you do to serve your community?
Yeah. Our target area is kids. Like, we want to make a church our size can't make a difference everywhere. We want to help the next generation grow in their relationship with Jesus. So we do our best to have a good kids ministry on Sunday, but we also do stuff during the year that can be attractive to a kid who doesn't want to sit still in kids' church. So we do sports camps. We do a summer spectacular during the summer that's open to everybody. The sports camps are advertised not just through the church, but through the elementary schools, because when we have them, like during vacation weeks, so spring break and Thanksgiving break, when parents have made it to Tuesday and they've lost their mind because their kids are running all over everywhere in the house, send them to Sunnyside. And so we'll run those for the sake of parents and kids who don't care about this place. We just finished Christmas, and so one of the things that we're excited about is bringing gifts to kids at school who wouldn't have a Christmas otherwise. So we've been able to partner with John Wash School and Sequoia School to do that out of these walls. And that's something that our church really is excited about.
Okay. So in one sentence, and I like big churches, but I know some people can't stand big churches, but what is different about your church and the main campus?
From the 2 campuses?
Yes.
First off, I'm not Pastor Fred. He's phenomenal. He's awesome. His heart for lost people, his heart for the world is incredible. Here, we're trying to take what works there and make it work here, but make it work within our DNA and make it work within the gifts and the abilities that God has released in Mountain View Sunnyside.
Kind of what I'm looking for in that DNA. If you could try to describe what that DNA and how it's different. I know, I don't want to like alienate anything, but other than the fact that there's got to be something that and hopefully you can try to paraphrase that for me to understand.
Yeah.
Why not just go to the big campus?
First off is it's closer. If you live down here to drive here. That was one of the reasons that we planted in Sunnyside way back in 2005 when the Grove Community Church started right behind us at Fancher Creek Elementary School, was we want a gospel church in Southeast Fresno to serve the 75,000 people who live down here. There are lots of churches here, and there needs to be more. So that's why we moved down here. One stark difference between here and main campus is the 400 more people who are there than there are here. It's a lot easier to know people and be known by people. So it's not on the cameras, but right behind David, there's a door out to the parking lot. So service ends, and I'm not as fast as I was, but I'm faster than most. I'm out that door in the parking lot meeting people who are here for the first time or people who I don't know. And that's an ability that we have as a church our size, is it's really easy to catch everyone who I don't recognize, to make them feel like Sunnyside can be their home.
And the first time I got here, I got to meet you too.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you even letting me do this with you. So, what is the cross?
The cross is God's grace and wrath and judgment and justice and forgiveness and love all wrapped up into one thing. If God wasn't holy, there'd be no need for the cross. If God wasn't just, there'd be no need for the cross. The cross is where a perfect God and an absolutely broken humanity can come together. Without the cross, there's separation forever, but with the cross, God invites us. God takes the first step. God puts himself on the line for us to have a relationship with him.
Okay, I like that. I answered fantastic. Who judges our fruit?
Everyone on social media.
I love that.
As fast as possible.
No, that's actually a unique answer because I've asked this a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some truth for that for sure, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but when we think about people judging us, I'm almost thinking you're thinking a negative connotation when you said that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm very serious. I have to like restrain myself from being so type A. So like I asked you a direct question, give me that. But tell me in a way, I guess in the spiritual realm, they said, we'll know them how they love people, we'll know them by their fruits.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking, who judges our fruits?
Ultimately, it's God. God knows every single person's heart, and especially in charismatic circles like Mountain View, we believe in the gifts that are mentioned and explained throughout the Gospels and the book of Acts. Those things still happen today. And so that'll cause a lot of people to say, whoa, I am out, done, eject, see ya, bye. Because there's some things that happen that aren't normal. I'll just say it that flat out, aren't normal. And sometimes it's because the Holy Spirit is activated. It's something inside of somebody, and it's a good thing. And sometimes it's because people want a response and people want a reaction. And God knows the fruit, and God knows what's behind somebody's heart, and God knows what the motivation is and what he's doing in an instance. So I think in our fast replying age, it's a great thing for us to remember. Like, God knows what's going on, and there's no way that we can fake a response or fake a reaction or fake a lifestyle that God can't see through.
So I feel like a lot of times in church, and again, I've been churches, and again, as I'm looking for a new church, I'm thinking at some point I might step out of bounds. I might need to be corrected, or I might sin. How does a church handle a sinner?
Well, we exist and we're run by sinners. So how does a church handle a sinner? That's a great question. I think a lot of it comes down to relationship. We can't expect non-Christians to act like Christians. I think that's something where the church, in a sense, has to laugh at itself sometimes, just strictly by the way that we're depicted in TV and movies and all that stuff, by people who don't really care about the church, who want to talk about the church. Like, we can't expect people who don't believe in Jesus to act like they believe in Jesus. And that includes everyone who comes here on a Sunday. My prayer is that we have a lot of lost people that are showing up trying to figure out what this Jesus thing is. And the other day, I'm not saying that Christians can't smoke. They shouldn't, but they can't. And I'm getting ready for church, and I'm walking through, people are starting to get here. I'm like, man, it smells like cigarette smoke. That's okay. It happens within the context of relationship. So if you decide, I want to be a member here, I am about helping this place grow and using my gifts to do that, then there's stuff that comes along with that relationship. So church handles sinners based on their relationship to the church. For me, as the pastor, there's a relationship that I have with the church that governs and kind of gives me a destination. This is the way that my life should match up as the spiritual leader of the church. But if I'm somebody who doesn't care about Jesus, doesn't care about the church, but shows up here, there's no relationship where the church is going to tell me, hey, you shouldn't do that, because you're an outsider. And Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians. You can't expect outsiders to live the same way that we do, because they're outsiders.
So they walk into your church. when are they considered family?
The church is a group of people that belong by believing. It begins when we believe that Jesus is the Son of God who died for our sins, and that the life he wants for us is a life lived with him in charge. So family begins with belief.
So if I believe that Jesus died for my sins,
Mm-hmm.
is that enough to be considered a family when I walk into your church?
Yeah,
It is.
I think so, because we're brought together by God's heart for the world. So John 3:16, God so loved the world, and that foundational part of his relationship with us, his coming for us, makes us family.
So I have a friend who's not a believer, and he kind of says all I have to do is say I'm sorry, and everything's just fine. He likes to drink, he likes to cuss, he likes to mock my God.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like in some way, when we're in the church, all of a sudden now there's a lot of pointing the finger. And again, I'm not saying your church because I'm barely getting to know your church, right? But I feel like from an outside of view, for as much as I can't empathize with that, but I can say that people are like almost they're going to judge you more while you're at church than if you're just out drinking and partying and having fun, because no one's going to judge me for that.
Yeah.
So now I'm trying.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried to commit my life, but I'm still smoking, I'm still drinking, I'm still living with my girlfriend, whatever that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you now, as the pastor, handle that?
It comes to relationship again. Like,
Okay.
I talk about this stuff often. Like God, the longer you stay, the more you're going to hear this. God's plan for sexuality is one man and one woman and one marriage for one lifetime. And that's the destination for God. That doesn't mean that anyone who doesn't measure up to that, like you're flat out kicked out of the church. But this is what we're going for. This is what we're leaning for and pushing towards. So within relationship, then I can come alongside and say, hey, man, you talk about loving Jesus. You talk about wanting to be a man of God, and you're living with your girlfriend. I want to encourage you toward marriage. And that's a conversation I've had with lots and lots of guys and lots of couples. And one of them has taken me up on it.
See, and that's a beautiful thing that you're saying right there, because I kind of feel like, let's say that there's 5 couples in your church,
Mm-hmm.
and 3 of them are having, let's just say 3 of them are living together.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is messing up maybe once a month.
Mm-hmm.
The other 2 are being completely pure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on the outside, I'm thinking, I have my children, and I'm like, I want to punish, I want to isolate, I want to kick them out,
Yeah.
versus all 5 of those couples are in your church.
Yep.
So when would I actually get kicked out? And I'm asking these questions like in a way like, for a friend, right? That kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Because I feel like there's a lot of things that a lot of us have lived. And so I'm curious, because I know when I was living inside the church but worldly,
Mm-hmm.
no one corrected me.
Yeah.
And I think they're kind of like, they're probably thinking it, but no one really came up to me and said, bro, I really love you, but what's happening right now is just not good.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like Jesus at all.
Yeah.
And like he says, I don't want to get theology, but it's like at some point, I love Jeremiah, and he's like, don't even pray for him. Right. And I'm thinking, oh God, is that him lamenting, or does he really mean like, don't even pray for these people?
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting way off base here. I'm sorry, but it's a point that I think I'm trying to understand in church, because again, in love, like you said, I totally agree with what you're saying. I agree with the marriage thing. I agree with the relationship thing. But again, being a part of that, and actually, like when I work for a large company, they have all their, this is what we believe in, these are our core values,
Yeah.
and they absolutely no any trace of core values.
It looks great on the wall.
It looks great on the wall, right? And so I think that, and I can't say this to your church, but I know there's some churches that they have all these ideas that they believe in, but they can't execute it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering how, as a pastor, do you help that doesn't happen in your church? Because I know you're one person, you've got your leaders, but then you have your congregation, you've got those 5 couples, right? You're like, what am I going to do with those 2 that are living together?
Mm-hmm. I'm a distance runner. I love it. An event that I never ran because I flat out have no desire to is a 10,000 meters. That's 25 laps around the track. And I think that's similar to how pastoring is, you know. I can think of one couple right now who's living together. They're part of our church. Like they're there every Sunday, and both of them know exactly where I stand, and we've talked about it. And they're still doing stuff. So does that mean that they're falling short of God's design for sexuality? Absolutely. Does that mean that I'm going to give up after 9 months where it hasn't gone the way that I wanted to? No. Because as shepherds, we can't beat our sheep. You know, we can tell them where they're supposed to go. We can encourage them, hey, this is what I see. This is not going to end well. I want you to do this. And if it works in month 10, then that's awesome.
Pastor, that's the most beautiful thing I've heard you say today. I honestly, you're right. Don't beat your sheep, right? And it's like, what was Jesus' example? Anyhow, all right. So it's about 10 minutes left or so. I love playing ping pong, and I'm going to use this as an analogy that my game in ping pong hasn't gotten any better in 10 years because I don't get to play with anybody that can beat me. And so I don't know if you're good at it, but I feel like when I'm doing this, it's like I honestly, in a way, feel like I want to challenge you with some of these next questions. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
And you can say, I don't know if I want to answer that, but Jesus. Well, I'm jumping around because I feel like, when's the last time that you've preached about the end times?
November of 2021.
Okay.
Some of that comes from 13 years in high school ministry where people aren't thinking about what's going to happen when the Lamb comes back and all this stuff. They're thinking about how do I fix what's going wrong in my life? They're thinking about tomorrow. They're thinking about when they get home. They're thinking about the stuff they're worried about for next week. And so much of my approach to preaching especially is what can you apply before you get to your car?
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I like to say the Reverend because we forget that he was, but in the museum, there's our lives begin, the end, the day we become silent about things that matter. And another one is the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. So give me an example of where maybe you have done something for that kind of, I don't know, as a comparison to those two statements that he's asked us to, or at least he spoke of.
The first Sunday after Roe v. Wade, you know, that was a victory for life. It was a victory for the unborn. It was a victory for women, and it was a victory for women of color. Abortion disproportionately affects communities of color. And here we are south of Kings Canyon. We're a community of color. And as much as people want to say that was a defeat for women, that was not a defeat for women. And so I stood right over there and said that same thing. This is a day for women to be treated for more than what their bodies can give a man. It's a day for them to be treated for the children of God that they are and protected. And abortion disproportionately harms women of color and communities of color. And so that was something very clearly to step into the fray and go bold on that one.
If COVID closed your church, I probably shouldn't even use the word COVID, but let's just pretend.
So when COVID closed the church?
Let's say that you're no longer you're not. This building's gone.
Okay.
Let's say the tornado came. This building's gone. Property's gone, or the bank repoed it. I'm just something. This building's gone. What do you do? What's happened? What's next?
Find a parking lot with power. So after the flood, we moved back down here, and we met in the parking lot and did church in the hot, in the smoke, in the rain, in the cold, in the wind. All of it was terrible, but it was a lot better to be in. And I think that's part of the blessing of the church is there's nothing in here that ties us to this place other than it's comfortable. So the church gets closed again, and we use this word again, pivot, to continue to bring the good news of Jesus to people who need it.
So Miles Monroe said a couple of things that I really loved just before he passed. He said, great legacy of leadership is what happens in your absence. True leaders don't invest in buildings, they invest in people. Yeah. Success without a successor is failure.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you mentoring?
Who am I mentoring? I think a Christian, our kids director, who got on my radar because of his heart for people his age who don't know Jesus. So I want him to kind of pivot that, use that word again, down 10 years and raise up our young men and our young women to follow Jesus. So there's Christian. I've also got my Shape group that meets on Thursday mornings at 6 a.m. And it's a regular group of guys who I'm taking them through one chapter of the Bible a week. We talk about it. We talk about what it says to us, what it says to our lives, and how we can live this out. So those are 2 areas right there.
Why should I, and I'm thinking that person out there that's hopefully watching this, why should I come to your church?
Because the church is the hope of the world.
No, your church.
This church?
This church.
Because we are an imperfect, broken group of people, just like everybody else. And you're going to be challenged. You're going to be loved. You're going to be included in community life in here. And if there's something that you don't like, with all sincerity and blessing from my heart, go somewhere else. So we want to be about reaching this part of the city and everyone who trusts us with their time. And I think if you come with us, you're going to hear the good news of Jesus, and you're going to be around people like you who are trying to follow Jesus in all the brokenness and in all the mess of life.
So in closing, I feel like, do you think it's crazy to think that something like this, as much as I don't want to be so proud to think it could, but that this could actually impact more people in the way of these kinds of things than you standing up for 35 minutes talking about something? Is it, do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially because of how YouTube has gone just from like a TV where you sit down and you have the remote control with the cord and all that stuff to a phone that lives in your pocket. And you can listen to stuff while you're cleaning, while you're working. I listen to podcasts while I run. So this is normal. I think this is great.
So this is totally, life begins at the end of your comfort zone, but you're probably used to doing this. So I just want you to talk into that camera over there and invite someone that lives in your neighborhood to come to your church.
Yeah. So if you live between Chestnut and Temperance and Belmont and Jensen, I'd love for you to join us on a Sunday at 9 or 10:30 at Mountain View Church, Sunnyside. That's Kings Canyon and Bergen, just on the other side of the wall from GB3.
Pastor, thank you so much for your time and taking your time to answer my questions. I really, really appreciate it. So
absolutely. God bless you, brother. God bless you, David.
All right. See you.